We're very excited about today's webinar. Again, my name is William, and I'm with Go2group. I will be your host today, and we're joined by our very good friends over at XBOSoft. So just a couple of key items before we get going here. We have a ton of folks on the call today, which we're very, very excited about. So what we've done is we've muted everyone's mic or phone, but we're not going to keep them muted for very long. But it is quiet right now, just so we can get through a couple of these, few little slides so we can get started. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, as usual. But today what we're going to do is open up the questions during the actual discussion. So if you have a question, what we anticipate happening is there's a little hand icon in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have a question and you have a mic or a telephone you're dialing in, feel free to raise your hand. We'll go ahead and note that you have a question, and we'll just unmute you, and you can go and ask the question right to our panel. So that'll be pretty exciting. If you don't have a mic or are not dialing in by phone, no problem there either. Just go ahead and use the questions module or even the chat module that is also in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll just go ahead and ask those questions on your behalf. So that's pretty exciting. We're pretty excited about that. Certainly if you're on Twitter, go ahead and use the hashtag XBO G2G Agile either during the call today or during the webinar today or afterwards, and we'll certainly follow up you did that way. In addition, we have some contact details at the end of the webinar in case you want to reach out to us directly. I'm happy to provide those as well. Great. So today's presenters, really excited about both Sean and Mike joining us today. Sean is with XBOSoft. He's a QA and test lead, and he's working with teams in mainly the financial sector, financial services industry. But he's also acting as a mentor for the junior members at XBOSoft, and he's also providing a lot of support for both co-located and distributed teams. So really excited about having Sean's experience here and providing some inputs as well. In addition, we have Mike Mayhew from Go2group. Mike is our CTO, and he's our Agile evangelist. He does all or a lot of our training for our clients, and is a super guy. So we're excited that they're both joining us today. So just a quick run through for today's agenda. We're going to go through a couple of things, such as kind of just a general overview of what is Agile, and realistically, why should you care, and then how how does Agile fit, methodology or process or tools fit with both test and development. It's kind of an exciting time to see how the two play with each other. And then we'll talk a little bit about location, co-location or distributed teams, and certainly what does it actually look like. So we've got a couple screenshots and some ideas on what it might look like. And at the end we have a couple of examples, one from XBO and one from Go2group, from clients that we're working with in an Agile manner, and then certainly some follow-up information from XBO and Go2group. So with all that introduction, I'm going to see if both Sean, are you there?
Hey, I'm there.
Hey Sean, how are you doing?
Okay, and hi, fine. How are you doing, Bill?
Good, thanks Sean. And did I get the title and your description? Did I do okay there?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we also have Mike from Go2group. Mike, are you on the line?
Yep. How's it going?
Good. How you doing, Mike?
Good.
Good. And Sean, Mike, Sean?
Hey, Sean.
Hey, hello, Mike. Nice to meet you.
Cool. So, so we've got a couple of just key points here, Mike and Sean, about Agile. Communication, delivery, ownership, recycle. These are kind of things that we probably hear as folks talk about Agile. Mike, do you want to just start off and maybe talk a little bit about Agile? What it is, what your experience is, in that direction.
Sure. Well, most of my experience with implementing Agile is usually, obviously, people moving from a waterfall process or or a rational unified process, IBM shops, and they want to move into an agile methodology. There's obviously a lot of there's usually the developers and the developers are very excited about agile and working in that manner and doing more iterations than longer monotonous cycles for releases. But there's definitely some skepticism usually from the higher ups, especially in bigger companies, because they're not familiar with that style, and they're more in line with classic project management and creating project plans in Microsoft Project and setting deadlines. But the one thing that is quite common across most companies is that it's kind of like the Dr. Phil, how's that working for you kind of scenario, because usually more than not, shops are missing deadlines. The classic scenario is that you have business analysts out there, they're collecting requirements, they're creating large business design documents or use cases that can be upwards of 30, 40, 50 pages. And then they're giving this to the development group to where they're then, if they're doing classic rep, they're doing use case realizations and providing class diagrams, and there's all this time and effort put into this, and put into the synchronizing of what the technical approach is based on what the business requirements are. And that's just the beginning. From there, it goes on to the developers actually doing the development, and the project managers are saying, when is this going to be in an environment for QA to start testing? And then there's this, let's throw the code over the wall to the development or to the testing environment and have QA test it. And then, of course, as we've all seen, there's problems with the initial testing. Everything's broken or nothing works, and so we already start slipping. And we have not just little pieces and parts that we're dealing with, but we're dealing with a large code base and a large project. So it's go back to the development and rebuild this thing and make the fixes and then give it back to QA. And at this point, they've lost time. And then not to mention all the status meetings and, the senior management meeting about what is the problem, what's the holdup. And it just it's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of people involved in going kind of the dog chasing the tail scenario until they finally get it out. And Agile, and the reason why everybody's kind of obviously moving in the Agile direction is because if it's possible to take those big, large use cases and break them into smaller pieces like stories and even epics and having more iterations, then we can kind of get an engine going, if you will, with other things like continuous integration, and we have got checks throughout the process instead of throwing over the fence. And in the end, what ends up happening is as we build these teams, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, is there becomes what I call team dynamics in the sprint team. So they become, they can increase their capacity and their velocity based on them working together, because now QA folks are working with dev folks and they're collaborating on a continual basis, which is different from the original scenarios. And that's, that's pretty much what the basis of what I teach and what I've done in the real world with real world lessons is migrating folks to the Agile process. Now sometimes companies will be doing Agile, but they'll be doing it in kind of not a full-on way, and whether it's Scrum or Kanban, I just mean that they've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and so we also help to get them into the full Agile cycle.
Oh, that's great. So it sounds like for more or less this has changed that people are going to have to try to adapt to simply because it's a process that is likely going to provide results maybe a little better than the results that are currently happening. So I mean, just to kind of take a look at these 4 bullets here from the communication standpoint, I suppose that's pretty obvious. The delivery part is probably more or less just making sure that these releases get out to their customers and clients, in a regular iterative fashion. And you kind of touched on the topic of team, which I'm sure we'll get in a little bit further, but that's more or less the ownership of the actual release or the project at this point of the sprint, is that the team owns that, so kind of leave them alone and let them finish it, and then once the next iteration comes out, we can add some more pieces to it. And then on the recycle part, just more or less, okay, here's sprint A, next is sprint B, next is sprint 3, right, sprint C. Is that about right? Is that kind of how it touches all 4 of those points?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so as far as iterations are concerned, they're taking, well, first of all, another concept in Agile is that teams are self-managed. So when I talk about team dynamics, I mean that sprint teams are co-located, so they're obviously, collaboration is a big factor. Because the idea is that we're not really measuring Scott or Mark or John and what they're able to turn out in a period of time. We're actually measuring the entire team and its capacity and its velocity, its speed of delivery. And in doing that, one of the main important pieces and one of the hard parts for project managers and directors is that these teams are self-managed. They're not, one of the problems with waterfall is that you have these developers in an area and they're working on software, but you have the constant drive-by scenario, where you have PMs and whoever that do these drive-bys. And this is distracting, and this is taking away from the concentration of the developers. So already we have a problem with the classic type process with this co-located team that is basically self-managed and uninterruptible during sprint time, other than by their Scrum Master. They become more focused, and again, the whole collaboration aspect. And I'll go into that a little bit more shortly, but it's just a more fine-tuned engine than the previous old school style.
And you mentioned a couple of words there, or introduced a couple of words, co-location and Scrum. I'm sure those topics we'll touch on as we go through the discussion. But just wanted to bring in Sean. Sean, do you have any thoughts on, Mike did a great job from an Agile development perspective, kind of what we're trying to get across. I imagine a lot of that is true with tests too.
Yeah, I think that I did agree with the idea about what Mike talked about. Because I'm a testing specialist, so I think that I would just want to mention 2 points from a tester perspective. If compare the traditional project and the Agile project, because for example, when I started my work 7 years ago, I just was a tester in project which is using the V model, and actually in that project I never had any chance to meet or customer or users of the application. And even after 1 year, I became a testing leader for another traditional project. I saw our customer one time in the project planning meeting at the beginning. But things changed when I joined the Agile project 2 years ago. I'm very amazing that our customer were very happy to join the meeting in the project. And they trying to join every meeting, so sprint planning meeting, demo meeting, and sometimes daily meetings. And also, to be a tester, another change is that we will have more chance to communicate with customer to help them to creating the user story. So the communication, I think, is a very key point for the Agile. And also, for the delivery, if we stayed in a traditional project, so if the project is very long, say maybe 1 year, so maybe we have to wait at least 2 months to see the first version of the product. And usually we don't have time to finish the complete testing for that application because of the delay from the developer. That happens often. But in Agile, actually, for example, in the Scrum, every 2 weeks there will be a new version to demonstrate to customer. And before demonstration, and the tester or I need to test the application to make sure everything goes well. So these 2 points from testing perspective is changed from the traditional to the Agile.
Well, that's great. So, so just a quick aside, I know that we have a couple of folks with their hands up, and let me just ask a quick question to Sean, and then we'll start opening up the questions for both Mike and Sean. So Sean, it sounds like from a communication perspective, it's actually opened it up not only between testers, together and building a communication team, but also opening it up to clients too, to make sure that the process is including them in the entire kind of process. So from a communication perspective, that's awesome.
Yes. We of course we need to. I mean, in Agile, it's not only the communication in the internal. We have to include the client into our communication tool. Of course, I think the more the better, because actually the objective of the project is trying to build a correct system and for customer. So if we can include more the customer, involve customer more, then we will get very quick feedback, and we can build our system very quickly and right. So we have to try our best to catch our customer.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I'm going to open it up here. Jade has a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jade. So Jade, your line should be open. If you have a ask your question. Hi, Jade, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so about just hearing about Sean and Mike saying about the communication in the Agile projects. I'm wondering because I'm a test engineer, so I'm wondering whether it should be a senior tester engineer that can be involved in an Agile project, or a tester who has developing experiences that can be welcome in an Agile project. Is that true, or any other situation or any other suggestion that for a tester engineer be involved in an Agile testing project?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think what I'll do, and Jade, great question. I've gone ahead and just muted your line just to keep the background noise down. But so I think that's, Mike, you were kind of getting into this earlier, and Sean, you were touching it too. Is from a team perspective, I mean, it sounds like the team is now being, responsible and owning the actual project. But how do you actually build that team? Mike, do you have a response?
Sure. Yeah, and that's where I was talking earlier about team dynamics. So there really is no description of what type of QA person would go onto a sprint team. And let me just be clear that, some Agile teams believe in less testing and more automated testing. So in other words, not like automated testing like Quality Center or quality quick QTP, but unit tests and unit testing. So what I find works well, and when I talk about team dynamics, I usually from a person that may be planning a sprint team, I look at what type of software are we developing, and who from the QA area would make a good fit on the team. And this is based on a lot of different things: the expertise, the genre of the development, and even sometimes personalities of the individuals that are going to be on the team. Because it's important that a team synergizes, or they will not probably increase their capacity and velocity. But it doesn't need to be a development kind of geared QA person, because what ends up happening is, what we hope that ends up happening is, I call it cross-contamination as a joke, because the developers are supposed to learn from the QA and vice versa. And I coined a couple of things, collaborative unit testing. And what that means is, now let's get the QA folks that are on this team involved in watching how unit tests are run and validated using TestNG or JUnit or whatever. We have continuous integration. So they now become more involved and they learn about the actual development process. And by seeing these unit tests execute, that helps them to determine their test plan better. You know, how can I test better to go beyond what these unit tests are doing? So there becomes this whole learning back and forth, and so you know, anybody that is a QA person is certainly welcome on a sprint team in my mind.
So it sounds like the team is put together not necessarily by their own experience, but maybe how it relates to that specific sprint or that specific project.
Sure. I mean, you know, in my experience, sometimes we build sprint teams that are doing production support. So they're basically dealing with bugs in production all the time. Maybe perhaps a large backlog of bugs that we're not able to deal with because we're in a constant cyclical waterfall release process. And in that case, you know, you want to pick people that are good and understand the product or software from 0 to 60, because a production bug could be anything. And they are probably going to want to look at maybe a Kanban process, you know, more of a task-driven process, and a quick shooting cycle, you know, maybe week, at the most 2-week sprints. So they can turn out these bugs and basically have them be production ready at the end of their sprint, and then get those merged into the right appropriate branches in the repository to be moved out into the production. So in that case, you're kind of looking for people with experience that have a large amount of experience with particular software, but can, you know, do production support type of development. There's other folks that are really good at designing, and maybe there's some QA folks that are really good at testing complicated business rules engines or whatever that are involved in the application. That may make up a development or a new feature sprint team. Those kinds of things.
So it sounds like the teams themselves picking them is pretty fluid too. So Sean, Jade mentioned that she was a test engineer. Is that, you know, kind of mirroring what she had asked and Mike's response and kind of your experience building a team? Is that, it sounds like it's a pretty important part of the entire process.
Mm-hmm. I think that there are a lot of my colleagues, they are junior tester, and they wondering, they have the same question with JD, whether the Agile team need a senior tester. So actually, when we build a team for the Agile project, there don't have any requirements for the level of the testers. Even you are the junior testers is also okay, because I think the most important part is that Agile sprint, actually the Agile encourage the Agile team doing some self-improvement approach. So they encourage that the team member help each other to improve their skills. So I think it will not be a big problem. You just need to try your best, do what you can do to help the team, and keep improving your skills. That will be okay.
And it sounds like, Sean, you're a mentor to a lot of the, you mentioned junior members too, but so it sounds like having that leadership position to help guide the team is really critical when, you know, especially in a new process.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Great. Great. Good stuff. So just a reminder, we're going to go on to the next slide, the next topic here, but don't, you know, don't be shy about raising your hand or asking a question. Jay, thanks very much. We've got a couple of other ones that are coming in too. You know, feel free to use the questions module or the chat ones too. It'd be great. So let's just move on to the next slide. So we kind of went through this already, or touched on a little bit already in the previous discussion. But so let's say that I'm a test engineer, or I'm a member of a team. Why should I care about Agile as an individual, A, and B, why should my team, my manager, care about even looking or thinking about Agile, and maybe even like, how do I convince her to, you know, kind of adopt this process, or at least give it a try? Sean, when you're building out teams and you're introducing Agile, is that question ever asked? Is like, wait a minute, why should I even care about this?
Actually, when we're talking about build a team for the Agile, when when we talk about why we want to transit from the traditional project to the Agile, of course the most important is that we care about the quality part, and I think that the Agile applying the Agile method will definitely improve the quality part. I think there are at least three main Agile practice to help us to increase the product quality. The first, I think, because in the Agile project, most of the team will applying the test development driven, which we call TDD. And if we applying this method, the programmer or the developer will start to writing their testing code first, and then they will start to build program to pass unit testing. So this method, this Agile practice, will ensure all pieces of application code are tested in the unit level. Also, because as I mentioned, as we talked in the last slides, in the Agile, most of the Agile projects will using frequent small release, and for example, every 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And this also ensure the testing team will involved into the project very earlier, and they can start to test to guarantee the quality of the application at the beginning of the project. This is also very important. And also, we collect in the Agile, we collect our customer feedback very quickly, and so we can fix, if there are any issue, we can fix this issue in the next sprint or next build, and that's also very good. And then if we can doing guarantee our quality, and I think because the customer also will see our delivery very frequent, every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and they will see that we are on the right direction, then actually we also increase the customer satisfaction, which is also very important for our project. Yeah.
So it sounds like one of the reasons kind of generally might be that you close the feedback loop. So instead of just providing some questions out there to either the customers or your colleagues and then hoping for a response, you're actually pulling in that feedback to part of the process, part of the two-week iteration, and really helping to build in or to take in those requests or those requirements into the entire process.
Yes, exactly. Because from testing perspective, the quality usually means that meeting the customer requirements. So the customer feedback is, I can say, critical for building a very quality product. And then for example, in the Scrum, all customer feedback and requirements will definitely be into the backlog, and we will implement this backlog based on their needs, based on the customer needs.
And as you and Mike are talking, as well as the questions are coming in, I'm jotting down a couple of keywords that I think may be new to folks that are on the call that maybe we should kind of approach at some point. I've got 5 of them so far, but anyway, that's aside. But we'll get to those. So Mike, from that perspective, how from a caring perspective or kind of a an incentive perspective or evangelism perspective, why should people care about Agile?
Yeah, it's like Sean said. I mean, it's constant feedback with your users or your product owners. What happens is, because of that, you see immediate traction. So that, like earlier, I talked about the initial skepticism, but that goes away real quick. And again, real world experience. We had a backlog of upwards of 3,000 issues, bugs, and some of them were several years old. And during their several swim lanes of development and multi-releases via the waterfall process, they were unable to address this huge backlog of bugs. And by standing up a couple of sprint teams, within within less than a month, you know, the folks that were outside looking in could see the traction, and this was due to the fact that you know, there's constant feedback. Right off the bat, the product owners are interacting with the Scrum Master, and so they're planning the backlog with the team, and so the team obviously consists of not just developers, but QA and whoever else is on the team. So there's constant communication, constant collaboration, and constant feedback. Even from the development perspective with continuous integration, there's just constant feedback. And when we radiate information out about what's happening within a sprint team via, you know, the different tools that we use, whether it's on a big monitor or whatever, or on a wiki, everybody can also see the traction and the progress. And by breaking things down into smaller pieces and putting them into faster iterations and having this constant feedback and this constant information radiation, it's just, you're looking through glass and watching progress and watching teams get more dynamic and get faster and better at what they do by learning from each other, as Sean said. That's one of the most awesome things about Agile is people learn new things and they get excited. You know, I had a challenge. It's a challenge when you have a large number of developers that work under you, and you know, in my mind, I always, the worst thing for me is to not want to go to work every day. I just, you know, I don't want to be in a situation where you don't want to go to work. Work should be somewhat fun, or it should be as fun as we can make it. But it should be challenging, and you should be able to feel creative and excited about it. And a lot of times that's not the case. So when I have brought Agile into the different companies, you know, it was fun to see the developers get excited about developing and collaborating, and see them, you know, bringing new things and getting up on a whiteboard or making stories and things like that. So,
if I can summarize that, Agile makes your job more happy.
there you go.
Good. That's great. No, yeah. So it sounds like it's a real team-oriented, community-building, collaboration, enriching, you know, introduction, you know, for both the team, but as well as up into management, as well as across into customers. So it sounds like, you know, one of the reasons why you should care, and maybe like a big one, is you know, getting feedback from everybody and actually taking that feedback from these important points and actually implementing them within each version or each sprint that's happening. That's good. That's really good. So again, we've got a couple of other questions that are coming in, and I'm going to ask those in a second here. I'm going to move on to the next slide, and then I'm going to roll up the questions as Sean and Mike are talking. But feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, and we'll go ahead and open up the line, and you can ask it yourself. As many folks have done, either use the chat piece or the questions piece there, and we'll go ahead and get to those too. So looking at more from an Agile and test perspective, and maybe Sean, this is kind of geared towards you know, into your wheelhouse, but can you talk a little bit about, you know, from my perspective, you know, Agile is very much geared towards project management and software development, and included in that entire process is test. So how does test fit in with that Agile model?
Okay, actually, yeah, it's a bit of, okay. Actually, I think you're right. I think the quality is very important in Agile, and the whole process of Agile is testing. For example, at the beginning, we start to creating the user story, and the tester will be involved in this stage. They will help customer to creating the user story. And the purpose that we trying to involve to the tester in creating the user story is that we want the user story is testable in the later stage. So in the later, when the user story is implemented by the developer, we as tester will start to do some user story testing. And also the tester we using TDD method, and one of our tester responsibility is trying to help the developer to design the unit testing code, because it's not that we create code. Actually, we're trying to understand what the developers write, and we're trying to find that is there any gaps between their unit testing code and between the real scenario. Maybe because we have a testing perspective, sometimes the developer will forget some testing scenario, so we can give them suggestions. And also in the later stage, we will have our regression testing and automation testing, and also if for experienced tester, we can contribute very good exploratory testing to help the team to find some very complicated defects which cannot be founded by the normal regression testing. So I can say that the testing is everywhere in the process of Agile.
Okay, that explains a lot. The key part is that you don't want to separate the test team. You actually want to include them in the process, because that helps the whole release and the iteration go so much smoother.
Exactly.
And then a question came in with regards to unit testing, and is that, if you're in a team, if you're in an Agile team, who's responsible for creating the unit test? Is that something that's kind of built into the backlog or the requirements, and then ownership is provided or allocated to the team, or who is actually responsible for creating the unit tests?
And, okay, Mike?
Okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, with test-driven development, the originating concept is from the development side. And we talk about extreme programming and things like that along with Agile. And one of the first things when I had introduced a couple of Agile teams in the past, before they even were created, was to start what I coined collaborative unit testing, because I knew that the QA folks had never really been through that process. And so as the developers are trying to do test-driven development and develop the test cases before they actually code the actual logic, they would run through these test cases in a collaborative fashion with the QA folks that were being tagged for the sprint team. And immediately what happens is obviously they're learning from each other. Initially the QA folks are learning about unit testing and how it works and how they write these test cases. But one of the things that you'll read in a lot of Agile books is that the idea is that kind of QA folks become developers and developers become QA folks. So as a team works together and moves forward and goes through a lot of sprints, it's not uncommon for QA folks to start writing test cases, as they start to learn how to do it. And the next thing you know, you've got QA folks with an IDE open and they're in Eclipse and they're writing test cases. It's what I call a positive feedback mechanism. You put, it starts to, you put more into it, and as you put more into it, you get more knowledge, and it gets faster and better as you move forward.
Great. Yep. More communication, right? So it seems like that definitely does make sense. So we have a couple of questions. Sandeep has their hand up, and so I'm going to open that up in a second. But a kind of an interesting question came in with regards to manual and automated testing. I'm going to read the question how it is, and then if we need to paraphrase it all, we can do that. But here's the question, and I think it goes to both Mike and Sean. How to avoid testers doing the manual regression testing every 2 weeks when automated testing cannot be up to speed as the features change? So how do you revert back to manual testing if you can't get automated testing up to speed, especially if you're talking about iterations and sprints and so forth?
Yes,
Sean?
I think that since they're a bit of tricky actually especially if your Scrum only have 2 weeks, because usually we will have nearly 8 days or 9 days to do the development work, and so maybe you will ask, is there enough time to do the manual testing only in 1 day before the release to the customer? And actually, I think that it's the best situation that we need to create our automation regression testing as quickly as we can. And if we don't have automation script here, we have to decide which kind of part is important for this release. I mean, based on the risk of the business. And then because we cannot do a full regression testing, sometimes for the complicated applications, there may be there are too many test cases. For example, in my current project, there are nearly 1,000 test cases for the full regression testing, and we cannot finish in every release. So what we did right now is that at the beginning of each sprint, I discussed with the customer and sometimes the developer, and we decided which test cases will be executed in this release. These test cases either is affected by a defect fixed, or is affected by an introduction of a new feature or change. So we just run the subside of the regression test cases based on the analysis of the risk.
Yeah, so it sounds like, it really depends on the priorities, and this probably goes back to the backlog, right, is to understand, prioritize the requirements from the backlog, and then, the testing is part of that process too.
Yeah, this is Mike, one of the other hard to swallow things for some of the higher ups is that, things that come out of a sprint are production ready. So there's no testing or anything after. When they say they're done with their sprint, that stuff is production ready, unless of course you're doing iterations leading up to a main release. But all of the factors come into play when we talk about being able to regression test. Is what actually is in the sprint, and do we need to do full regression? Do we have continuous integration, and do we smoke test on our continuous integration server? And then, of course, as Sean said, what test sets or suites are we going to actually implement for regression testing during this particular sprint? Those are all decisions that have to be made. But again, throughout, as you move forward, sprint to sprint, it's always a good idea to hone in on these things and to be developing. There's usually time where when they complete the sprint, they have a little time, hopefully, as they increase their velocity, they can work on building their unit test suite, and also their regression tests, and being able to cut those into modules and things like that.
Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of hands up. Sandeep was up first, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute. So Sandeep, you're live. Go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Sandeep, and I just hearing the testing in it, and there's mainly you were discussing about the development team and the testing team together as a collaboration effort. But my situation is different right now. I'm working in a live, I'm working where there is a product is already in the market, and the developer and test is already there. They are doing it, but my team's job is to test the product when there is a release, and before it launches to the production, we are using the super user. So we are conducting the mock test before it goes to the production, and after the dropping or after the deployment. So how Agile will help me here to make it more improvement manner? That's my question.
Great question. So yeah, thank you, Sandeep. So I think if I heard correctly, so their process is already in place. They've got a product that's already out to market. Their team is doing the smoke test and making sure that everything is ready to go. How do they mainly basically, well, A, how does Agile help them, but B, how would they move into an Agile process to actually kind of get that stuff all together in a process before the actual release. Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. You know, it kind of takes. I think that's where the word evangelist came from in reference to technology, because it's not really. I don't know who came up with that one, but anyway, it takes somebody. It takes an evangelist within a company to make these changes and to push these kinds of things. But obviously, depending on whether you're at the same physical location with the folks that are developing this product that's already in market, or whether you're distributed, you would need to set up the ability to collaborate. And even if you're not going to initially be full Agile, in order for you guys to be more involved during the development process and to get that constant feedback and get that collaboration going, there would need to be either some tools put in place or some co-location to be laid out, and also the designated quote-unquote team or whatever would need to be considered. And there is a little bit of pushback not from all sides. Developers initially are like, you mean I have to leave my confined cube or whatever and actually talk to people? That's sometimes a hurdle. And then also QA folks having to do the same thing. So that's the neat thing about the tools that we have today with Jira, Greenhopper, and Synapse, that they can actually kind of create this collaboration process without necessarily being physically next to each other. It's not quite as good, but it's better in other aspects. So the only answer I have is to try and set up maybe some discussion to talk about how you can do constant collaboration. Agile aside, how can we constantly collaborate with development so we can start testing early and we can test during the development process?
So maybe it's not going from A to D directly, but rather going to from A to B, introduction, evangelism, talking about it, B to C, introducing some of the ideas, maybe putting some of them in play, and then maybe C to D, where you actually kind of try it maybe for a smaller release.
Yeah, and that's baby steps is what it is. Now, and the thing is honestly, quality assurance, they always get the short end of the stick, right? Because they're the last they're the last thing to happen. So if somebody up the line misses a deadline, who's going to suffer? It's QA is going to be pushed to move quicker and to test faster. It's always the case. So there's this. Then of course there's this this animosity towards development. Hey, you held us up, and now we're in trouble. So definitely, the more interaction between QA and development, and if you can structure collaboration sessions or even co-locate teams, it's always better.
Okay. And just a quick time check here. We've got about 10 minutes left to the allocated time, so we certainly want to be respectful of everyone's time today. We're going to try to go through the slides at a quick pace now, but I think if we can, both Mike and Sean, if you're available, anybody that can stay on for maybe another 5 or 10 minutes to go through some of these other questions, let's kind of just keep an eye on time, because I want to be respectful for everyone. One of the questions also that came in the chat session is can we see what the heck does Agile look like? Is there any kind of visible representation so we can take a look at? And yeah, so we have a couple of screenshots on some tools that we've used both at XBO and Go2group with our clients. So we'll show a couple of screenshots of those. But I'm just going to jump over here to the next slide, and Sean, maybe we could run through this fairly quickly. From a location perspective, does that matter? I mean, today everybody seems to be distributed. There's not a lot of people that necessarily work in an office. They're always working remotely from home or what have you. Does location actually matter with Agile?
Actually, based on my experience, I really don't see too much difference when I'm in the co-located or I'm in the distributed teams. Especially if we have very good process management method, and if we are using very powerful tools, so I think there will not be a problem. For example, as this Rex for the communication in my current project, we using the Skype for a team communication. Now I'm working on a distributed project, so we are using Skype for the communication and for the daily Scrum meeting. And also we are using Visual Studio Test Manager to manage all testing stuff like user story and test cases and defects. And because task boards are very important part, so we also using electric task board to management the task in the Scrum. So I don't see any too much differences between these two ways. And I think that maybe in the later stage, and the Mac will also talking something about the Greenhopper, about the task support. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And so I think that the idea of utilizing or leveraging some of these other tools that are out there to really help the communication part, if you're not able to be co-located, is important to use, especially within an agile process where communication is so key to success. So Mike, what I'm going to do is just roll over to kind of what it looks like, and if you want to talk through, because I think this is really important to, the distributed side of the location question. I think we have 2 or 3 slides here that we can walk through pretty quickly and talk a little bit about location and distribution and so forth.
Sure. So this slide is actually a little bit before this is after the planning period. This is actually when we're working our tasks, and this example is showing it's actually a new feature in Greenhopper called Rapid Boards, and this is showing a couple of swim lanes based on teams. So basically we're saying that Team Y and Team X are working on a sprint, and these are the distributed tasks or stories that are assigned to them. Looks like the red ones are bugs and the green ones are stories, but there could also be test cases in here. We could have another swim lane for a test, and they could be moving their tasks across their workflow, basically using Jira and Greenhopper, as you see here.
And that's a good point. So this is Jira and a Greenhopper tool. These are both made by Atlassian, and these are tools that I think both, or I know that both Go2group and XBO have used with their clients. So just kind of moving on to the next slide, looks like another screenshot of Jira and Greenhopper.
Correct. This is actually a planning board, and this is the original Greenhopper planning board, and we're looking at it in list view. So those are, if you were looking at a whiteboard or a corkboard, you would have stories on Post-it notes, and just think of these boxes as stories and items that are being planned. If you look on the right, you'll see unscheduled, which would be your backlog, and then you have the ASP release, and it looks like there's an iteration underneath ASP. And the gray bar in the middle is a capacity planning bar, which shows our minimum or our maximum story points that we can consume within a sprint. And then as we move this bar up and down, it will determine the total number of story points that of everything that is above the bar. And that's kind of how we do capacity planning using Jira and Greenhopper. We assign story points to our stories and epics and our bugs, and we basically have them in this backlog view, and then we drag our bar up and down until we get to the right capacity. Then we can drag things up and down in rank, and then drag them into the appropriate sprint.
So we talked. So one of the key words, or the words that was introduced, was information radiator. Sean, from a co-located perspective, we might use an actual whiteboard where we just get up in the middle of the room and say, here's the backlog, here's where we're at, here's who owns what, etc. In this case, it looks like we can use something like Jira plus Greenhopper in a an information radiator like distributed environment, so everybody can use this as their own whiteboard. Is that something you've seen too?
Yes. Actually, we use some very similar tools that we can share the backlog. We can share the whiteboard, and we will have a different status of each task, and every team members can drag and drag the task to based on different status. So everyone in the team will see the status of each task. So it's very, very similar.
Okay, very cool. So let's move into the next slide. So this is another Jira screenshot, and it looks like this is a Go2group product, Synapse RT, which is more focused on the test and requirement side. But you can see the layout and the visual representation is very similar to Greenhopper and the Agile process.
Right. This is so this is looking at another task board under Synapse, and this is allowing them to basically look at all of the test cases in one screen and move them across the workflow. And as you can see, it's a test-driven workflow. It's, you know, is this passed? Has this failed? Is this, we can't test it, or let's close it out. And then on the right, we have more collaboration. We can basically, they can post notes to each other, to the test team or the sprint team. So where they can say, okay, we're going to start testing today, or we're done, we're planning on being done by 3, and everyone would see the corkboard. So again, we're trying to create a virtual co-located space within Jira itself.
Very cool. So we're 2 minutes away from the top of the hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll past a couple of slides for those folks that have to jump off. And at the hour, I just want to give you some options on questions if we hadn't gotten to them, because there's a couple of folks that are still looking for responses to their questions. But if you have to jump off, these are areas where you can contact us, both XBOSoft and Go2group, as well as provide some additional resources. For those that can stay on, what we'll do is we'll just go through a couple of these extra slides that are remaining here, and it'll probably be another 10 minutes or so. Sean from XBOSoft, you see his contact information there, services@xbosoft.com. Mike from Go2group, sales@go2group.com. Don't hesitate to drop them emails with any kind of questions that you have. They are both aquatic looking, looks like, guys. Very, very nice guys, very willing to help out as you've heard today. And then a couple of other notes that there's some questions that haven't got answered, and some folks wanted to do some other things too. Our hour today was just kind of to introduce Agile and to talk a little bit about how it can help you, and certainly involve you in the process too. But we are having a follow-on Agile project management with Jira and Greenhopper, so we'll actually get more into the nitty-gritty of Agile. That's next month in May 24th at 10 a.m. Eastern, so an hour before the start time, also on a Thursday. And if anybody has any questions about test development, bringing those two together, Go2group is hosting another webinar tomorrow at 10 a.m., kind of walking through that process and how you can actually integrate those two teams with a product, Quality Center and Jira, those types of things. So we've hit 12 o'clock. I know that some of you guys have to fall off. Apologize for kind of running through the end here. But if we can go back, for those that can stay on, we'll go back and we'll go look at a couple of these other slides that we wanted to go through. One of them was an example. So Mike from Go2group does a lot of the training as well as a lot of the implementation of Agile. So I thought it'd be kind of cool just to talk through actually an example of something that he's worked with. So Mike, do you want to pick up the example?
Sure. So we had a client that had not done Agile ever. They were in the classic scenario of we have all these things that we can't get to. We're constantly doing releases for our clients, and every release is kind of client specific. So they're in that many swim lanes of development, kind of changing the same code base, which is important. So the original reason why we started working with them is because they wanted us to help them with their branching strategy, because again they had parallel development going on with the same code base. So we came in and implemented a new branching strategy and upgraded their, at the time, Subversion, and then brought in the tool Fisheye from Atlassian, which allowed them to monitor their repository and look at the metrics and statistics based on troubled spots in the code, perhaps based on the number of commits and changes, and also allowed them to do code reviews using the tool Crucible. And then, of course, this information, they were already using Jira, so this information can be then hooked into Jira. But this is the initial thing that we did with them, was kind of to build that continuous integration, and to build that better repository layout or a branching strategy. And they took to that and they got off to the races. And then later on, they were like, okay, no, we're ready to go agile, and we've got all of these requirements that have been sitting around, and can you help us? So what we did is go over and kind of we actually went through their items and created a backlog, and we did this. They're distributed as well. They have offices. They have an office in Pennsylvania, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and one in the Midwest. So all of those folks came in, and we all met in Atlanta, and we went through that quote-unquote backlog and designed and broke down large requirements into smaller stories and kind of laid out and prioritized that backlog in kind of a training, coaching way, and then rolled that backlog into Jira, and then kind of went through some example, but kind of went through some sprints, as if we were in the real world, assigning things and building the teams, and that choosing the items from the backlog to put in and based on their rank and things like that. We did that for maybe another week and kind of did a little bit of training on the tools and the changes that we made to the tools to accommodate Agile. One in particular, mostly Greenhopper. And since then, they've become it's kind of like handed them the keys to the car there, and they've become quite the Agile company now. So they're full on 100% Agile, and they've had great success with it. They've pretty much cleaned out their backlog, and they've enabled themselves to do parallel development in an Agile way using the Atlassian tools, and they're frequent visitors of the Atlassian Summit.
Yeah, the summit. I have a slide on that later on if anybody has any interest in. The Atlassian Summit is a conference that's held out once a year out in San Francisco. It's coming up at the end of May, beginning of June. So I'll have some more information on that. So we had a question come in, a hand raised. Natal had a question with regards to continuous automated testing and how that fits into Agile, especially as you kind of transition that into a sprint mentality. Let me see if I can unmute Natal and see if they are available to actually ask the question themselves. Natal, you're unmuted. If you're there, do you want to ask the question?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Actually, I asked 2 questions. I'm not sure if there's an echo.
It sounds fine.
Okay. So my first question, which you kind of answered, our company has started to adopt the Agile Scrum framework. And as a test lead, one of the challenges that I have is we need to start move away from just doing 100% of our time manual testing and start doing more automation functional testing to incorporate that. With the 2-week sprints that we follow, my first question was, would we still need to verify manually the new features that are built to ensure that they're stable before we automate them, even in the Agile framework and especially the 2-week sprints, so that we can keep up with the automation and not fall behind? Does that make sense? Or I'm not sure if my question was clear.
Sure. I'll let Sean. Sean, do you want to take this one?
Sean might be having some microphone things.
Are we okay? Repeat the question because I cannot fully understand the question.
Sure. So Natal, I'll just ask right from your question here is, can you discuss how functional automation testing fits into an Agile model, especially when working in 2-week sprint cycles?
The functional automation testing?
Functional automation testing within an Agile model.
Okay, I think that's because at the beginning of the project, if we don't have a very good UI or user interface, actually a lot of tools, it's very hard for us to create the functional testing. That's why there's another guy asked a question before. We have to do some manual testing before, and then after we have a UI. And now, for example, for the current project I'm working on, at the beginning, the developer help our tester to create a mock UI, which is very simple, but they connect the functionality they developed. So we developed the automation testing to test functionality every sprint. I think that's very good priority idea, because actually for application the UI is not important. It's not so important, especially at the beginning or in the before the end of the project. So we can use a mock. My idea is that we can use the mock UI to connect to the function, and then we can easily create a function automation regression testing script. And then at the end of each sprint, maybe the last day or the last 2 days, when you have a new build ready to deliver to the customer, you can start running the regression testing and checking the result, and hope you can leave your developer have maybe 1 day at Monday, or at most 1.5 days to fix the bugs, you find in the automation regression testing. But the time is a bit of tight.
I guess where I'm getting confused is the UI is not built until we get it in QA, or until it's deployed to QA. That's when the UI is fully available. So by the time we verify it in the 2-week sprint and then plan to automate it, it's already the end of sprint.
Mike, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because what she's saying is they're developing the UI during the sprint, so how can they do test automation during the process?
Yes, and that's what I'm kind of expected, is we should be able to automate our functional tests within the 2-week sprints, as well as the new features are built.
Right.
So that we can add those to our regression suites, but we're not able to keep up.
I think what Sean was saying is, they started off with the bare basics of what the UI was going to be like, and then created their test automation based on that. And as new UI features were implemented in sprints, they could just add on to that test automation. Was their approach, or his approach?
Exactly.
And so, and obviously with a more mature application, you can build the test automation and smoke tests to happen automatically with QTP or whatever you're going to do or use. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. The only thing I can say is if you could build a foundation with what you have currently, that could help. But if every sprint they're moving on to a completely new page that has nothing to do with the previous sprint, then that's going to be tough. You're going to be, like right now, you're kind of behind the 8 ball. But if you have, for example, a login page and a base page, and you can start building that test automation as you complete each sprint, rerun that, because you're going to have to test the stuff that you previously built in previous sprints over and over. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think the problem is that this is an application that we bought. It's very large and complex, so there's a lot that we need to do to build an automated regression. So between building new features and existing, we just can't keep up. We end up doing manual testing the majority of the time.
Yeah, I don't think there's a silver bullet answer for that one, other than, like I said, do what you're doing probably, which is building your test automation as you go, based on what the sprint is about. And then over time you'll acquire a foundation.
Great question. Thanks, Sean and Mike. And I'm just going to move on here, trying to keep this going. But XBO had another great example on the Agile side that Sean was going to walk us through. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, just quick walk through, because I have been introduced. And in this project, we are trying to build a payment system, which is very similar to the PayPal. I think everyone knows. And this is distributed Agile project. The Scrum Master and the product owner is in one location. and the development, all the developers in another location, and the testing team in the third location. And fortunately, all these three teams, we have around 3 or 4 overlap time. So actually, we arranged the daily Scrum meeting when every team is available in the office. So we using the Skype. So we have daily meeting every day around 15 to 20 minutes. And also to getting familiar with each other, for example, we visit the development team and the management team once per quarter, face to face, have a very fun party and very good discussion about each other. It's very good. And as mentioned before, in this project, we are using Visual Studio Test Manager as the integration tools. And our main responsibility is doing the user story testing, automation testing, performance testing, and of course the regression testing.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's
very good. So we have a couple of questions as well that are kind of hanging out there, and I know that a couple of folks had to drop off. So how we're going to wrap this up is we're going to run through a quick slide with XBO, a quick slide with Go2group, provide the contact details again, and then after the webinar today, I believe we are recording this, so we're going to try to post this up on both XBO and Go2group's website, and we'll certainly provide an email, a follow-up after the webinar, just to make sure that everybody knows where to go to get the recording or to go get more details, or certainly to follow up with any other questions, and then we'll reach out to you directly with the questions that you might have individually. So just a little bit about information about XBOSoft. As you see on the screen, software quality consulting, big time, and they're all across the board from QA consulting to mentoring, the improvement on the test process, and then the testing side. You can see, functional mobile test performance. XBO and Go2group did a mobile test webinar a few weeks or maybe a month back, and it was very well attended, and it was very well interactive, highly interactive. They do a great job in mobile, and they've actually come with us in conferences and shared a booth, and we've had a great time. So if you have a chance to check out their website, please do, www.xbosoft.com. Terrific folks. Highly encourage you to visit them. And then Go2group, same deal. We're focused both on the products and the services side. We are Atlassian experts. We're Platinum experts. We also work with HP on the partner side, as well as Sugar, and we are on the GSA schedule. So for those government folks that are out there, please contact us, and we can certainly help you out with your procurement needs. On the services side, ALM, the lifecycle management, we're fully invested both as a company as well as internally as well as externally with our clients. And as you've seen today, Agile and best practices, we're all up for pushing that out there. I mentioned something about Summit before, here in the bottom right-hand corner. Terrific conference by Atlassian, San Francisco, May 30th through June 1st. Highly encourage folks to at least take a look at it. Go2group does have discounts available, so if you have questions, feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to provide some details on those. Q&A, I think we've gone through most of those. But again, contact us. If you have any questions, both Sean and Mike and the team at XBO and Go2group are certainly happy to help you out with any questions and point you in the right direction, whether it's resources or your training or anything like that. Both Sean and Mike are terrific. And again, thanks so much. A bunch of you guys stayed on. Really appreciate that. We're really excited about the May 24th webinar. We'll send out some details around that where you can register, but we'll certainly keep that interactive as well, and we'll be a little more conscientious of time. But certainly enjoyed talking with both Mike and Sean. Mike, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, thanks everybody.
And Sean, the same to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you everybody.
Awesome, and to you out there that are joining us, thanks again for all of your input, your suggestions, your recommendations. We really appreciate it, and we really look forward to seeing you on Thursday, May 24th. Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.